We'll start off with the roll call. McKee here, Schultz here, Bottoма
Not here.
here, Aaronkamp here, Nichols
Here.
All right. It's about water supply planning, kind of continuing the conversations from several other work sessions and meeting topics. So, Kevin, if you want to, get us into it?
Yeah, just a brief introduction. This is a follow-up to our work session a month or two ago. And I'll turn over the presentation to Ash Hammerbeck with Stantec, and then we can open it up and be available to answer any questions.
Hi, thanks again for having us. I'm Ash Hammerbeck. As you recall, I'm the project manager for this water supply and storage project. And yeah, I think we have some slides to speak to tonight, and we'll go over kind of our project objectives and our meeting objectives and review what we talked about last meeting, kind of set the stage for the topics.
Are the slides in the packet?
I am pulling it up right now. There's a strange
Not
setting.
there.
thing
Some of the
happening
slides are in the packet, but not all of them.
with
Yeah, so the type of materials we've provided were related to.
So this is
the
new, fresh information?
This is just to walk us through all the information that's in the memo that was provided in your packet.
Oh, but it was provided.
Just not in slide form.
Not in slide format.
Yeah,
Yep, this
but
is-
this is not new information.
It
You
is
would
not
have
new
seen it.
information.
Okay.
Yep.
No, there's no new information. We're just gonna speak to the memo.
Good.
updated,
Okay.
Slides, so we can
Gotcha.
follow along instead of reading through another document, so.
Sounds good.
Yes, we can click to the next one here.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah, so, yeah, I guess going back to the last discussion, really, most of that revolved around talking about the differences between a water tower and a ground storage tank. And, you know, the current location identified for that was Bellwood Park. And so I know there's a lot of other considerations and questions from the council, and since that time, you know, we've also authorized geotechnical borings. So we'll talk about some of those preliminary results from Ground Intertech, as well as local groundwater conditions that will affect the options and what's available to you in that park location. And then, you know, really we want to drill down on some of those questions, and if we get to it, we'll
Is that a
talk
pun?
little bit- Excuse me?
Drill it down.
When you say drill down, is that an intentional pun?
I mean, you can go there. But you guys as well as, you know, I don't know yet, but.
Pretty good.
I like it.
It was a good one.
Yeah. So yeah, so then if we get to it, we can touch on the architectural survey results just briefly. We want to hear your thoughts of, you know, what you liked or didn't like, and get into a little bit more just general updates about test well number 2. Drill down into that one absolutely, and then just give you a little snapshot of some progress we're making on the water treatment plant building layout, and some things to come when we meet again in January. So. Can you skip to the next slide?
Yes.
Yeah, so at your last council meeting, we authorized Ground Intertech to start with the borings. And so this site here, this figure at the bottom is the storage site. And what we did is, instead of you know, really drilling down into the footprint of what we think is the water tower location, since we wanted to kind of open up, look at other options, we put 3 borings kind of across that area, so there'd be some flexibility. We get some general information about where groundwater was at, as well as the general soil conditions to say where deep foundation is going to be needed here. Is there, you know, a lot of soil correction that would be needed to make that suitable for such a heavy load, the tower or tank. And then on the other picture there is the water treatment plant site. And what you see there is kind of like a building outline, along with some consideration for expansion, just to, again, see where our footings are going to be, see what kind of materials out there, and get a good sense going into design.
Is the water treatment facility, is that laid north to south, that image?
Correct, yep, so the road is there on the west.
Because I was under the impression that we weren't going to be able to access off 116.
I thought we were gonna have to come around the
Temporary or
backside.
long-term access would come from the south. and so
Okay.
we have to Design it on an interim, kind of decline, let us come off of 116.
Okay.
Long-term, we have to plan for that.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying.
So, yeah, so, summary of just preliminary results, Brown Intertech was willing to share their boring logs. They will be providing a formal report with those results, but generally the soils are suitable. There's not a lot of, junk material, and so that's encouraging, and we'll use that information as we get into our structural design for both options, so. That final report, will probably be issued there in January. There's a couple other borings along the trunk main route that we need to get some right of entries on, so those are still pending, but less critical than what we wanted to identify at first. So yeah, Brown was very accommodating to expediting that, so.
Sorry, I don't know what this did. Sorry, 1 second. There we go, sorry.
It's good.
It's okay.
There we go. All right, so then we also looked at the hydrologic info and evaluating local high water levels and like 100-year flood elevations for the areas nearby the Bellwether Park. And this is just kind of a summary. The existing ground is about 942. That's going to get built up a little bit in this park area. But the wetland complex, that blue area, that has a high water level of 938. And based on Department of Health requirements, the bottom of any storage tank will need to be above 938. So really what that means is looking at that option of a buried tank, really the only depth you'd be able to go down is 8 feet. And given the total height, that would put about 30 feet above ground, 8 feet below, and it's just kind of like, does that get you a lot? And so I think that's something that we want to speak to a little bit further and evaluate as an option compared to just being above ground. But really we can rule out that concept of it being buried and kind of flush with the surrounding area. Yeah.
Just real quick, and it may be coming up,
Sure.
my concern is the diameter of the ground storage compared to the diameter of the base of the tower. Are those dimensions available? If that makes sense. I mean, is the ground storage diameter gonna be 80 feet round and this tower diameter be 40 feet? You know what I mean?
Sure.
Just that comparison, just
Yeah.
down the
In
road.
In that first memo that we presented at the
Okay.
last meeting, I think there were a couple of figures where we talked about the radius of a ground storage tank. I'm blanking on numbers, the number that's.
It's about 66, so 70 feet is that ground storage tank.
So it was
That
this,
sits on the ground.
it was the same diameter as the tower at the top was
Yes, yep.
66.
We have to hold that same volume of water, so they're very.
I remember that, but then the base of the tower is what diameter?
You remember, we talked about those two options, so you have the really narrow one, and then you have kind of that concrete, so they'll vary.
Yep,
The narrower ones are in that 15, that 10 to 20 foot diameter.
but then we may have the mold at the bulbous, and then the larger
Yeah,
one
so it gets
was,
wider, the concrete ones are
Okay.
wider at the base, I don't have the.
so it's in there, thank you. I think I had those numbers in
And
my
I-
head, I just wanted to ask.
I think on page 2, it talks a little bit about what the footprint you'd need for both.
Yeah,
Not necessarily just the diameter of the tower or
thank
the
you.
ground tank, but,
Yeah, it talks about footprint, but then also too, if you're just looking at the physical dimension.
Right.
Like you say, there's the pedestal option, which can get kind of the mold and things.
Yep.
So there's the composite option, which is a lot bigger, and, you grab trucking.
Yep, thank you.
I think to Dean's point, the footprint on page 2, the 200 by 200, I take that as the site of the actual plot of land that we would need to cordon off for the facility, no matter what it is.
That's,
yep.
Exactly right, and so.
But I'm kind of thinking along your lines, if we're gonna have this 60-something foot or 70-foot diameter tank, and then we have to slope it with dirt on it, you know, so that we're not looking at the sidewall of a tank sitting up 30 feet in the air. Now we've got a lot bigger footprint on that 200 by 200. A lot of that space becomes totally unusable.
And I thought we had mentioned, but yeah, you're right, but that was when we looked at, if you wanted to just bury it so the whole thing's covered with dirt, your footprint isn't 200 by 200 by the time those slopes, I mean, we played it out, and I think it was like 300.
Yeah, it'd be way bigger.
So you're basically taking up the vast majority of this park, if that's the 200 by 200 footprint. If you wanted to try to bury it, you're literally talking, the park is now just slopes, you don't have much of a flat space.
So if we did have a tower, and negating if it's a pedestal or the concrete, we'd be able to use a bunch of that 200 by 200 space as open space, couldn't we?
Yeah, so really the thing, you wouldn't want to put any permanent infrastructure within that 200.
No, but we could have a
by
park
200.
bench or whatever.
Yeah, it just would be unusable when you wanted to go and repaint the tank, because you really need kind of.
Yeah, I doubt if
clear
anybody'd be
space
sitting
for-
under it at that point, but.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, it's just a matter too, of- I know you guys had asked a little bit about like, well, you want to fence it off, or do you want to keep people away from it, but, I mean, I think, yeah, when it's a tower, there's much less concern, and you would have a lot more usable, area immediately adjacent to it.
But then there was also comment that that elevation of that 160 feet helps with the start of our water pressure and everything else. I think that's what Kevin was talking about, that height does an awful lot for us. So-
Yes, yes. Excuse me, Steve and Ash can evaluate, but it basically gives you some redundancy if there's an issue. You've got time to react, so
Yeah.
it's helpful when you're learning your system and you're not highly experienced. It definitely gives a little bit of extra protection there to make sure pressures are maintained. So that is
Yeah.
one of the pros to a tower.
There's one less pump, one less generator. We'd have to have a generator out there, I'm sure, to run the pump if the power went off.
It's a simpler system to have a elevated storage versus groundwater. And again, when you're starting your own system from scratch and staff's learning along with it, that's a pro, again, to a simpler system.
Yeah, and this hydrologic info, it also tells us, you know, what we're gonna have is finished floor elevation for the water tower, and then, yeah, where we can put that ground storage tank. So what this tells us too is that, yeah, we're gonna definitely have to pump from the well up through the treatment, pump again to the ground storage, and then pump a third time into the distribution system. So it's extra pumping, it's extra electricity, it's another
It's a lot.
generator.
Lot to
So there's
consider.
no way to go from the treatment plant by gravity to that storage and then pump because of that elevations and the distance. So that's another kind of key finding.
If we went with a tower, what type of other exposed infrastructure do you have around the tower as far as, you know, any monitoring systems or anything like that? With the composite, I'm assuming you can hide everything in the base of it, but with the bowl on pedestal, you probably can't. You have to have something outside. Is there anything that's outside and exposed, or is it basically just the tower?
It's just the tower. And I mean, sometimes what you'll see adjacent to towers is if you have an antenna. So AT&T will have a little building
Oh, there's their
shed next to
boxes,
it.
yeah.
And that's, they use it, you know, there's on FTs there, it's just kind of
I think
there.
we wanted to lease that tower space.
Yeah, somewhere I saw an image where they had a tower, and I don't know if it was in your packet or if somebody sent us, where it looked like there was a power transformer next to it on the outside, so.
It's usually the antenna, or it's usually the utility provider
Oh,
that has it. If
okay.
you want to lease antenna space up on top of it, they have something at the base that they'll then bring their cables in and run them up to.
Okay.
I mean, there might be a small spillway or something to discharge the tank. You might see some surface features, but really no other structures. But there might be some components just for operational situations that would just, could be blended in with landscaping or something if that was a decision later when we dial it in a little bit, but.
May I ask a question
Yeah.
of council? Are any of you leaning any way of tower versus ground storage? Is there a consensus for a tower? Do we even need to talk about ground
I'm-
storage anymore?
I'm leaning tower if it's in the right location.
Okay.
So,
I have no conceptual problem with the tower, but I don't think this site is suitable for a tower.
So then do we talk about a different site before we go into the
Maybe that's
conversation any deeper?
I think that was the first question that staff had in the packet.
Yeah.
Is this the right site?
so,
If you want, I mean, that's really what we're looking for. At this site, this was the first site that was identified because we had the land rights for the Bellwether Park. It was in the water supply plan was one location, so this was that starting point, right? We had the land, it was available, we had the utility infrastructure in place, so.
Least
that's-
expensive,
Yeah, for all those reasons.
Land.
So I guess that's our, you kind of queued it up perfect for us, but what, that's the question we have for council is this site really where we want to be? And then if so, what infrastructure, but is this really where we want to be with that water storage piece?
Like, you guys are agnostic to the site. You don't care. You're just, whatever we kind of, if we lean towards a different site or if we lean towards a different tower versus a ground system, like, you don't care, right? You can work with all that so long as it's engineeringly feasible.
Yeah, whatever site, we've got to work through some of the challenges, we did the geotech, so it has suitable foundations, so that it kind of checks some of those boxes, right?
Yeah.
It checks the foundations, will work here. Elevation wise, the lower the ground, the higher you have to build the tower, because it's solely based off of an elevation.
Sure.
So this, checks the box, it's not. at the
Yeah,
lowest point.
for sea level, and we'd have to have it 1,000 feet high, it wouldn't be a good idea.
Yeah, we can design any system anywhere. They're just, as you're kind of identifying site stuff, there's some sort of sequence of, what are your priorities, cost, aesthetics, impacts. I mean, we're
Yeah.
trying to really hone in on your guys' input on what you want to see to help us site it. We could, figure out a way to actually do groundwater storage there. We wouldn't, engineering, cost, long-term operations, all the above would say that's maybe not the best idea, but if that was the only spot, we can make it work. So we are indifferent to it. We're trying to guide you. Our mandate to Stantec and myself is to try to guide you, have the information, lay out the pros and cons, and help navigate that. If it's not Bellwether Park, where's the next best spot that fits, what's next in line, and here's the pros and cons. So
And
we'll
that's
help.
the
If it's not
question.
Bellwether, we'll look for the next spot that we say is, number 2. And it doesn't even matter if it's number 2, what fits your guys' vision for how it works.
Yeah, can I talk about the?
yeah, go right ahead.
The only question I had, why isn't it a suitable space if Bellwether has done what they've said, has notified neighbors and future neighbors, is that could be a water tower site? I mean, why is it not suitable?
So I'll recap the same list that I had last time. So when we had the opportunity to go to Bellwether for Night to Unite, talked to a lot of residents, and I would say at least 2/3 of them were concerned about a water tower in combination with the Nelson development, in combination with whatever might end up developing on the south where they have more commercially zoned land. That area was originally zoned as industrial and was converted to residential. And we never really went back and did a thorough review of that area and what's going to come in to make sure that it's compatible. Those people went in knowing that there's industrial around them. But I think it's still a residential area that's surrounded by very intense land use. And from my vision for that neighborhood, I don't want to give them an additional infrastructure burden on top of everything that's going to go around them as well, if we can do something else instead. So that's where I'm coming from on it.
So Dean, I talked to the church,
Methodist Church
no, Hope,
or Hope, okay.
and they're open to putting the water tower on their property. So let's just pretend that,
Interesting.
there's a better property, and we don't have to burden the Bellwether people with a water tower in their backyard, and someone else says, well, we can put a water tower here. Then I think I I would be open to that new location because it has less impact. If we're gonna do something, just,
I didn't know that, but I thought our last meeting, the conversation was that general area to make it the least of costly and stuff, because that's a couple mile run of water south, and then it's gotta go back north up there to the Bellwether neighborhood and in areas beyond, so.
so I would just,
Good.
I would throw that out, not to say like, that's the answer, but since I spoke to a different landowner who's okay with it, I said, well, that sounds like in theory, on paper, good, but there are bound to be other factors. And so I'm open to that too, or the engineering feasibility, all that stuff, but I guess if it's all the same and we have to put a water tower, I'd rather put it in a place where people are like, yeah, you can put a water tower here.
Oh.
Or the other option is, I guess we can force the neighborhood to have a water tower. We already told them, but I don't know.
But then by what Jeremy was just talking about, and I've talked to a few of those neighbors in there too, do we need to redo the land use plan for that whole area up there, which is a whole nother nightmare?
We can just put the sewage treatment plant there instead of the water tower. Since we already planned on having something there.
Whole
Sending
bunch
your
of,
sewage to Met Council.
whole bunch of air fresheners.
Don't need any phone calls.
Interesting.
I thought that was the Prairie Island sewage.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Just a real quick follow-up, and this is to Dean's and John's combination, and this is just relative. The further you go away from where the infrastructure is today, then the more expense there is just due to the infrastructure you have to install. So it's, you have to factor willingness of landowner and cost into any decision. There might be some elevation differences, and potential outcome of tonight's meeting might be go look at another site such as maybe the one we can connect after and find out about, and just come back in January and say, does this work? And maybe we can do a soil, we can come back with a plan to you and how to execute that, if that's where you want. That's what we're looking for tonight is, do we plow forward with Bellwether, or do we want to slow down and look at another site? We can probably always choose to come back to Bellwether if we had to. We don't want to, spend 2 months checking out 16 different sites. I mean, we can, that's just not great uses of resources, but I don't think it's a bad idea if it was your discretion to look at another site. I mean, that option is available to you.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'd be very open to that. I think one item that we talked about at the last work session on water was trying to get Maggie engaged in some kind of a cost model to figure out what impact on water bills we generated by X number of increase in capital cost. Has that had a chance to be developed in light of all the budget stuff that's going on at the same time, or is that still pending?
It'd still be pending, so we can have her look at that with, once we've buttoned up the budget and get an idea of what we're looking at for cost-wise. To Kevin's point, the further away we get, we'll just have to factor that all into the analysis.
Yeah, I guess I'm open to another site, but I don't want a list of sites. So if the whole church,
Maybe we start there.
yeah, because the further out we get and the more infrastructure we have to cross.
Right.
I'd imagine just crossing 116 will be an endeavor.
It's a little easier with water than sewer, because depth's consistent, but, I mean, I don't think the Hope site's an unreasonable investigation. So,
Yeah.
if there's no consensus on Bellwether, it's certainly reasonable to pursue that in a timely manner, bring that back, and hopefully there's enough information to make that choice. It's always easier to go to someone that checks one of the boxes, right? So if you were to mandate, if you were to ask us to go out and find 2 sites, and if we have no one that's raising their hand, that slows down the process, and if you have someone saying, come talk to me, it makes it a little easier already off the top.
Would that be a better place, and would it be better to go, instead of 750,000 gallons, go to a 1 million gallon tower? That's another thing to look at, wouldn't it?
I think that, I mean, when you go larger tower size and volume, you're adding cost. I mean, that's a different question really, because that's how much.
Okay,
I think it would just be the pipes to get there, so.
But
It's all relative, and it'd be a little bit different on our systems and elevation if that was compatible. So we could bring that back again relatively quickly and be able to give you some data points.
The last
by the-
meeting, one of you guys were talking about if we put one at this location, there's still probably another need for another one up in that general vicinity anyhow. So that's why I asked about
Long.
extra capacity.
The future system would need additional storage throughout it. And so, we've looked at kind of this build out for that box footprint, and that 750 gallons was kind of meant to target that northeast box that we're starting with.
Okay,
As we grow, we'll have to look at the next storage, and, as these conversations continue, if the first one's re-elevated, that second tower might be a more cost-effective ground
Ground
storage.
storage.
Because you have this as kind of that safety net for your system. Every community is different as you're building out the maturity of your community and your system and your staffing, your capacity, all those things come into play of really what that right next step is, so. I might just ask one more question as we talk about looking at other locations. Let's just say, for whatever reason, that the next property owner who's willing doesn't, whatever, through discussions just says, yeah, I thought it'd be a little different, this isn't for me. Is there any land use guidance as we, instead of coming back and saying that didn't work, what next? As we talk about even from a land use perspective, does the council have any guidance for us of, is it just the fact that is it residential, or is it the fact that it's residential with houses there? And there's a slide with the land use plan that might kind of articulate
Yes.
this.
Good
but,
question.
much of this area is guided low-density residential, and then we have the business park and mixed use, some of those different uses. From a land use perspective, I just want to be thinking ahead. I don't want to lose time having to bring that next conversation back if it doesn't go forward. Is there any policy on,
Yeah, I
even
would,
from a land use, what you'd be looking for, recommending?
I would prefer to keep it out of residential, if possible. I'd be much more open into, the business park, potentially mixed use, and that's what it looks like Hope is mixed use.
Yes.
So that's where I would look in there as opposed to the low density residential.
So it's just resident, okay, that helps, just knowing it's not.
And that's just
They're not-
me on that.
And I think if it has to be residential, because there's nothing else suitable, probably something that hasn't been built on yet would be preferred over something that has.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then you're starting to get further away, right? Because you look at that map, everything's going to be built on, or has been built on, unless you go north of Steeg Road, which that's probably that's a lot more infrastructure piping up there. So to me, if you can't make the Hope location work or the business park location directly south of that work, it would be a hard sell for me to go outside of Bellwether, because I gotta imagine the cost with land acquisition, especially business park, they're gonna want a lot more for that land sitting with the water tower on it. Mind you, it's gonna, all of a sudden, that land is gonna be all sold up, and it's gonna be next year with the plan in front of us. But
And I think that's where the financial model would be helpful, if we can get a sense for
Uh-huh.
what is the impact on the enterprise of an extra 500,000 or 100,000? If that's $20 a year for an average user of water in the area, that's one consideration. If it's $150 a year, that's a different.
yeah.
And I have
Altogether.
talked briefly with the property owners of the business park there on 116 and 30, and they're open to at least having continuing conversations about that, see if something would work. So that's another potential route to.
Is there a general area along where the pipe was going to be laid from the treatment over to this water tower site? Is there an option along that corridor? Again, I think you said that we still haven't gotten access to those soil borings and stuff like that, but
I mean, in general, no.
Too much
You're
staff.
looking at some of the bigger open areas.
okay.
So you're looking at like the Hope Church and the business park are probably your next two prime
Okay.
target locations.
They're pretty big sites, you'd think.
Yeah, then it's just, I mean, every site has its own challenges. So this is, near, newly built houses. Other sites might be, well, where, I mean, they might be open to it, but where do you put it where it doesn't devalue my property, right? 'Cause you're ahead of any plans, and so that becomes a challenge in that situation, and we start chasing our tails, so.
Well, the,
We can, I mean, again, someone raising their hand and saying, I'm open to it, it's definitely worth vetting out. That is, I would support that if that was the desire of the council. That is not, that's a prudent evaluation, and then we still have the option to potentially go back to Bellwether, not saying that's right, but we still have that door open as long as we make timely decisions.
Right.
If we start pushing into, correct me if I'm wrong, start pushing in, we have some infrastructure planned to go there, so, and it's planned for Van Blaricom, so they're into the winter months, so some things might slow down, but we get into spring, we might start losing that opportunity as best as it's suited right now. But it doesn't mean it can't happen, we're just trying to highlight kind of different timelines for decisions, not trying to pressure, just let you know, make you aware of information and as everything's moving up there. It's very fluid. So we're just trying to stress fluid decisions are happening all the time. We're spinning plates, but they're all good conversations. And I would say if we can do some more information, it's kind of stepping out a little bit here. We make some good information, in end of January, try to make some sort of final decision. I think we'd be okay on timeline.
Yeah, and from an overall timeline perspective, I mean, we want to see what have to have any land security purchase before MBH would review plans. So, and that puts us as needing to have that deal finalized by the fall. So we can stay on track for bidding, construction, beginning of 2023.
The Hope location would give decent access to the infrastructure from Maple Grove, right? This was all going to be tied in with the Maple Grove and stuff, so that
Yeah, we're tied into
that
Maple
would
Grove.
save some of it.
Regardless.
We're tied into Maple Grove, so we just really need to connect the water tower
Yeah.
to our existing pipes. So we're kind of have this blob of pipes here. We're connected to Maple Grove. They're going to be a backup resource, which is good
Yep.
in the long term. And now we're just trying to, where do we put that tower and attach it to
Okay.
our kind of our current infrastructure, which is Bellwether right now. So the further we get from Bellwether, the more pipe we have to put in the.
Running a pipe to it and then a pipe back up to
I
Bellwether.
think just the pipe there is,
It's just one pipe,
Yeah.
especially that way. With the elevated, if you wanted to look at a ground storage at another site, then you have to run a
Whole
pipe
nother.
there, and you're looking at 2 pipes.
So, to follow up on a couple questions, if we have to put in additional length of pipe to connect a tower from a more remote location, in the future, that might, do we realize any cost savings in the future because that pipe is already there? Or is that installed by the developer and it's cost that we pay instead of them?
I think it's closer to your second example.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It's hard to say, but it's closer to your second example. We would be pre-installing some infrastructure that would likely be more efficiently installed through a development, but we'd have it for a purpose. So anytime it's for a purpose, there's a reason for it, so.
Okay. And then second question, so the current candidate site is on Park. If we were to put it on a different site that hasn't developed yet, is there a way to give credit for the land as park dedication that we would take when it develops?
That is a great question. I don't know. I could certainly look into that. I think we could have that as part of our discussions. I don't know exactly how that would work with our current ordinance, but
I don't
I
either,
certainly
but-
can look into that and have that as part of our discussions, as well as have Maggie, as we kind of finalize what that length would cost, be able to pull together some, the differentiation between the proposed potential site and then the Bellwether site to get us some good numbers.
Perfect.
For that.
Very good.
Yes, for
Thank you.
January.
does,
I think Ken had a comment.
Sorry?
Did you have a comment?
Well, back to Councilmember Nichols, we talk about if we run the pipe, we pay for it, but it's not a net zero. We would recapture
Once
the
development
fees
happened.
when that goes. So I don't want it viewed as totally our cost and totally on that side of the balance sheet. We would recapture some.
Okay,
It's a
thank you.
small thing, but I just didn't want it to be totally on the expense side ahead.
Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, so are we all on the same page then about next steps, looking at that site, see if something can work there, and tower if so?
Can I ask
Yeah.
sort of not related question?
Sure.
So this is just, we have people come in here and they want to know, like, there's this theme in some developments about keeping Corcoran, and how do we have our town still have some of the rural character and the feel? I just read an article that talked about, I think it was the 10 coolest water towers in Minnesota. Like the Pequot Lakes has a bobber. The town with the umlaut has a teapot. There's just some interesting ones out there, and I'm not a creative mind, but I would
You want it to look like a silo?
I always want everything to look like a silo. But I'm wondering if there's something we can do to have without costing too much extra or any extra. I don't know. I'm open to having the water tower be a stamp and something unique to the area rather than just a big blue circle. So if there are ideas, of course, yeah, my vote's with having it look like a silo. I don't know how that happens, but it probably could.
It's a standpipe tower.
Well, it's an easier sell if it's on 116 and 30 versus in the middle of Bellwether.
No, I know, yeah, exactly.
So,
I'm hoping we can come to a different location, but before it's too late, I wanted to throw the idea of having it look different
Yeah. I
somehow.
like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in general, you would end up paying, more money for something more
I get it.
custom. I think, yeah, some of those, examples, those are artifacts of the past, and definitely smaller tanks too.
Yeah.
So when you're talking this volume, but definitely, I hear you, and, that's something we can look at.
I think one was an ear of corn. They're really cool water
Wanna
towers.
see that.
there.
The one in Rochester, Libby's.
For instance, yeah, in Minnetonka Beach, they just upgraded their water tower, they wanted to stick with their, kind of picturesque, that's what the water tower in Minnetonka Beach looks like. We don't want to change from that, and so they did spend extra money to maintain that aesthetic. So,
Did it
yeah,
say how many of those
possible.
towers were still in use or just?
All of them were,
landmark?
yeah, they're all still in use.
I thought the corn cob in Rochester was.
They just built a new one in
Still
Rochester
there.
somewhere.
Oh, I don't know. I
It's okay.
I don't know if it was that one.
I wasn't really,
I'll, like, Twitter to get water tower, we were talking about that last meeting, so.
Good deal.
Does it come with, the design, would it come with a logo of some sort, and we could make a custom logo potentially? Maybe an option?
Right, yeah, so the logo is, part of the design that they would,
And the woods.
Just hit the woods.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that
Cool.
better too.
Sounds good. So I think that's probably good for that first part. Do we want to get
Yes.
into the other architecture stuff a little bit?
Yeah.
So kind of maybe our goal with architecture pieces, I think Brad sent out this architect survey to everyone, and so we kind of have an idea for, which buildings generally like, which ones will work, but with the numerical scale, it's kind of tough to just pull, none of our buildings won't look exactly like any of these, we just maybe want to elaborate the discussion to why didn't we like some of these, or why did we? Kind of as this design gets refined, it helps us actually when we have a layout of the plant, but now we can come back with pulling some of these features that we liked, incorporating into actually our design, rather than come back with a plant design, either a little more readily.
Yeah, one comment that I'll add in the context of these architectural considerations, like, some of y'all thought, I don't want anything that's too tall. One thing with our design is that we would like to incorporate an aeration tower, and that's something we'll talk more about as we get into the design, but an aeration tower is something, tall at the front of the treatment process, and it helps oxidize the iron and manganese without having to add a bunch of chemical and those types of things. So it's really beneficial from a cost perspective and treatment perspective. So just thinking about, there's gonna be some height to this building, there's different ways to hide that, and we're gonna make that the silo.
There you go.
Or, pitch roofs or things of that nature.
So you're thinking
That-
right.
those
That's
are the
good.
things that, as we're going through this, I want to hear your thoughts.
You could make it look like an agricultural building like that with a silo.
I know, this one right here looks like an ag building almost.
And so, these are all examples too that Stan has designed and worked on for the most part, so. Anything possible, so we could just kind of click through these.
Okay,
I don't know if you have a
perfect.
comment kind of as we go through these.
Maybe you can speak to some of the elements, if you're able to, just broadly, on this height might be an option of one of the things that could work for the aeration, or maybe this material looks really good, but from a longevity standpoint, it's maybe on the lower end of the longevity scale. So maybe just a little bit of anecdotes to help everyone in this room kind of learn the options, but, just in an
Yeah.
open discussion. It'll be helpful for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's talking about, is it more modern, more rustic, just kind of the overall aesthetic feel. And then I think too, talking about the, slope versus flat roof. I think that's another big kind of decision. Materials of construction, thinking about, what do you want it to look like now? Is it a more durable brick, which is, a really solid building that's gonna last a long time? And then also too, there's different ways to get relief with brick. It sounds like, I don't want it to look too institutional or, something to that effect. Like how can you soften those things up? How can you, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can do that too with precast panels.
So one, maybe just before we get into one simple point, these, with the water treatment building, it'll be a concrete building of the inside, right? So we don't want to build it out of wood materials, they get a ton of moisture. So it'll be, obviously, it's a concrete shell, but with that, the veneers that you see on a lot of these outsides change. And so you have these block veneers, these brick veneers that have the longer 50-plus year service life. You see them on a lot of institutional buildings that you see here in Chaska, right? More the institutional look, the brick outside, steel roof, you have those longer materials, but maybe less of that residential touch that we talked about. So this one maybe wasn't rated as high, it has that pitch roof. I don't know if anyone has some context of what features they maybe didn't like about this and why it would have rated lower.
That looks kind of modern to me.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we can come up with a design maybe that shows some respect to like the heritage of Corcoran, the farming community and whatnot. I mean, there's gonna be a barn that's directly south of this, right? The white barn that's on.
Yeah.
Yep. Right on 116.
Yeah, I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. But I'm wondering if you could do something like that, like an old like grain silo look or something to that effect. It looks like it's been there for 100 years, right? But it's actually functional and modern inside.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool.
Well, I think even, I like where you're coming from, Alan, and I agree. I don't think it necessarily has to look old, but the same kind of design. In Medina, you see a lot of construction going on where they're kind of mimicking that farm aesthetic with cupolas and, copper on the roof and stuff like that. And that can look really cool too. It doesn't necessarily have to look old, but it can still fit with that general motif.
Sure.
I had a cupola I tore out my house.
I know.
I took my cupola, put that one in my barn.
We can kind of click through
Yep.
some of these other ones.
So maybe if we can go two more. One thing that I want to talk about is that whole, so here you see some of maybe that ulterior finish, the pitch roof, the way to hide it. This is maybe a little more classical than farm over here.
Yeah, it's more cottage to me. To
Yeah,
me, that
it's
screams New
really
English
small.
cottage.
Yeah.
But this shake was why I didn't like this one. It just was kind of a maintenance nightmare, I think.
Yeah, because again, this is small, so they could probably justify it.
One thing-
Again, small facility, well, we have to replace that.
I'll also go back to, so, I don't know if, back when we showed the soap warnings, if you guys saw the building footprint and just all those expansions as well. One thing to keep in mind is this, we want a small feel, right? So you talk about like the barn, some of those feels, one of the things we have to be cognizant of. It looks nice when it's this size, but when it's 3 times bigger, you know, it doesn't look then like a steel shed instead of a barn or some of those things that, just to bank it to here. So we want to be cognizant of what that looks like for those future phases. And there's things we can do as we've started laying out this building, maybe move the faces of the building, create some variation, to create some difference there, but as we pick out these things, I just want to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, you know, and design of the building can change based on what it's facing, right? So what you have facing 116, if that's the smallest profile of the building, we can have that look totally different than what the other two sides that are hidden to the road, you know, because I really don't see the land to the north of it developing. There's one house on an island and swamps surrounding it. And there's homes to the east of it, and south of it. You know, unless those redevelop, it's kind of sitting by itself. The most exposure it's gonna have is on 116.
You're right, and that's a good point, and that's why the small side now will be on 116, but as we build out, it might eventually be. the
Yeah,
long
so
side,
it's, to me, it kind of, design might depend on how you build out, which direction.
Yeah, and so the idea right now is to we're gonna start kind of on that south end of the property, and our initial footprint would be there, and then the addition would be on the north side. So you kind of have kind of that long skinny north and south.
That's because of the direction of the property runs without a
Yeah,
color.
yeah, and then also too, just the way you lay out the treatment cells. You don't want to recreate the wheel and make it,
Yeah.
you just want a nice clean flow path through your treatment, so. So yeah, we can click through a couple of other ones. I think, so this is the Stacy water treatment plant. This footprint is very similar to what we're proposing for Corcoran. So just kind of from this perspective, this does not have an aeration tower, but there is kind of that, you know, second level where you can get up and you can see the detention basin where the water comes into the facility, and then it kind of like all flows out into these front windows. And this is on a busy road, and so, you know, you see those windows from the side, and that's kind of your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever driven by I think it's a power plant in Hutchinson? Right on, was it 7?
Yeah.
I mean, they've got the big windows, you can see right in the turbines. It's really cool to drive by, especially at night when it's all lit up. So I wouldn't be opposed to having windows too, that people can actually see in if it fits into the architecture of it.
I think Maple Plain has a similar one on their treatment plant's a little more set back, but you can see in and see some of the,
At night, you can see it when they're lit up.
Yeah.
yeah, this one right here, you can see from the road. It's the right view from the right,
Yeah.
but you can see in and see the pipe work.
Yeah, and I don't know if windows would add a large issue for maintenance, you know, and as far as humidity in the building and all that stuff. Or a security rationale, I don't know.
For the pump rooms, it's not uncommon to have the lights in there. It's even from a viewing standpoint, and probably nice for public works to have some natural light that comes into when they're working on this equipment. And so,
Yeah, the only thing that can sometimes be an issue is there's chemical lines that go into that pump room. And if there's ever like little leaks, sometimes that chemical can etch the windows. And so I would be really ticked off if my, you know, nice new windows all got this chemical. It's really hard to kind of get off there, so that's a risk that would, you know, depending on the orientation and, yeah, are we showing off the pump room, or are we showing off, you know, maybe there's a big conference room or something like that, that's a little bit more visible.
Yeah.
Some of the bigger mature communities will actually create educational spaces in some of these facilities. I'm not advocating that here, but just to give you an idea, some of the, you know, future planning, there is communities that utilize it as a resource, an educational resource. But I think that's probably premature for Corcoran's needs at this time, but you can pretty much do whatever you want, so.
We could do a drinking fountain up front.
You could still take tours and do it that way and just not have an expensive showcase, but yeah, it's just, options are really endless.
Well, to that point, could you even envision like a community room and have a community room there, and then as we need future expansion, reduce community room size and expand into it? I mean,
I think,
it would cause
would
issues
think-
with parking and all the other stuff, but,
I mean, look, safety is probably another consideration. This is your treatment, you're putting all this water out into the system. I'd be a little about having all of those events that are unsupervised,
yeah.
When you have tours, you can have your operators there showing them off, but we might want to just think about that as well.
I love the idea. My idea would be indoor storage that then gets inverted back. But I love the idea, and we're on the same wavelength, and we'll probably preach that. You'll hear that as we bring some less forward, is we're gonna try to take advantage of that if it makes sense, and at least present that as an option for you guys to consider.
How many vehicles do you think Pat will want to store in there?
It's either that or the police stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
As big as we can build it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're out of storage space in our town for our stuff.
We got a lean-to, we could just enclose that in
Those
and
don't
then build
count.
more lean-tos out there.
Better with the rustic aesthetic one.
Yeah, the lean-to?
We don't even need walls on this roof.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's all stainless open air, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. So, yeah, here's a combination facility with their fire department, and treatment facilities, so the treatment's up over on that side. There's obviously some, topography that they're dealing with, at this site.
So
Pretty flat out there at the other side, so.
how much does that building cost?
Yeah, and that's a higher end finish. So I mean, in the context of, what we would budget and say is kind of
Yeah.
plate cost, this is premium finish,
Okay.
when it comes with the glass and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
multiple materials. And
So how much was that one?
I don't know how much.
Oh,
that
come
is, so
on.
I apologize.
We can try to
You
can
research.
dig that up.
Yeah.
We should.
We can get that.
Yeah.
The-
We could look at that in terms of like, this is an energy.
It's
mini
Victoria.
energy facility,
I know, I
and it
can
costs-
get that for us.
Again, with the firehouse and the next door.
The other thing too, and I don't see a tower there, but a tower, a bubbler like what you were talking about,
An aeration tower.
yeah, an aeration
Yeah.
tower and stuff. The other tower that would be missing for a firehouse is a hose tower, practice facility, 3 or 4 stories of just stairways going up, and again,
Wait, what? A hose tower?
have you ever heard that?
Yeah, but I don't
If
think we're
you go to-
talking about a fire station.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do something this elaborate,
Oh,
we're
yeah.
talking a bubbler and aeration.
Yeah.
Right next to that, sure, a hose tower. I'm thinking all kinds of things.
I would.
Spend all kinds of money.
I was thinking about
Jeremy's
more
taxes will
about
go
building
up.
out and then using that space for something else in the
In the
interim.
time being.
And then
Yeah.
being able to easily convert it as we need more water demand. So we're not building more building at a future higher cost.
We're just renovating it.
Yeah.
We're just renovating it.
Well, yeah, and I mean, I think to that point, really the expansion of your water treatment plant would be cells that need to be constructed a certain type of way, they're gonna be dug down into the ground, so really you would effectively demo, it wouldn't be really a renovation, it would be a demolition of kind of that footprint to accommodate your treatment. I'm just saying it's not like
Oh, so
an
you,
interchangeable type of.
you couldn't just pull out the floor and excavate underneath to put those tanks in internally?
there's
I
a
mean,
lot
could
of-
you build the shell to what you expected it to be 50 years from now, what you would need for demand?
I think it would be less simple than.
But we
That
can-
might be hard. I like that
We can
idea.
look at it and keep it in mind as we look at it.
Yeah,
See,
there's
I
a lot
just-
of underground, like buried piping, and the foundations are significantly different.
The question
So-
is how usable the space is. There's a lot of elevation change in there,
Mhm.
so just, we could look at it, just not everything's on one singular plane when you walk in these facilities, and so, it might be way down, way time-wise, it's a big hole around the basement. So
Yeah, I'm just thinking about what's the
value of the space itself.
what's the value of the space and use, but then if you're talking about well, if we have to add on to the facility, now we're moving a whole wall and building exterior walls and foundations, and there's a lot of cost in that too. And presumably, it's gonna be at a much higher future cost than it is currently. So that's where I was trying to see where, can we look at what that would cost, you know?
Yeah, we can look at that and see if it just makes sense from a layout to try to.
And that may help hone in on a design too, if we're talking, if we establish a design along that 116 area now with the expansion already factored in versus.
Right, we know exactly how big the building will be, what the layout would be.
Right,
Yeah.
otherwise you're just saying, well, we can't do that one because it won't look good when we expand it.
I think that takeaway that I'm hearing is when we bring the plan, we should almost have the future building with the current, so you can, at least, it might change, but you have a visualize of what you're stepping into
Yeah.
in 5, 10, 15 years. And to your point, I'd love to build it for the whole area and never have to worry, but we have that balance where we have to keep the budget. I love the creativity, I'm not downplaying that at all, but, you know, some of these things do push the cost up a lot, and that's always a factor. So our goal isn't to tell you, we love the idea, but it costs this much to do it, and we'll try to bring it as pieces to the extent we can. It's like, if you want to do this, it's X amount more, and then we'll hopefully have some of those rates, and we can factor in that. But
Perfect.
again, these goals for me are to hear you guys' ideas. They're actually in alignment of a lot of our design ideas, so I'm excited to hear that kind of alignment, because I'm preaching expandability, whatever. You know, if you take us back 3 years, we had a smaller site. The growth that we're seeing in Northeast, we came back and said, okay, now it's gone up from 8 to 14 million. That was just sheer by the volume coming back at us. We're continually guessing, right? We can't overbuild it and have it sit there. That's a bigger, you know, burden to pay
Right.
back. There's actually a chance that we are coming back to you in like 3 years if it's more aggressive than our plan. And we're trying to balance not to do that either, right? So it's gonna be a give and take, and
Yeah,
it's a challenging target. When you invest in a structure this size, it is a challenging to hit that sweet spot. So we're really trying to keep it in the parameter so we don't have to renovate it too soon, but then we're not sitting there oversized for a decade either.
right, so if you look at what you need now versus what you'd love to have in the future, right? And show that, but then also look at, well, I expect if X growth, I have to do this expansion at this point in time and factor in 10% cost in materials and labor, you know? Figure that out and kind of figure the incremental steps. Because maybe if we're starting to see that we're gonna hit these targets sooner, it may be cheaper or not much marginally more to do it all now.
Do it now.
Yeah.
And I think that's why we went, before we started, and bumped it up, you know, to 14, because we saw
Yeah.
that forecast coming. So,
I don't think there's a chance we'll do all of it now. I think that you can't, with the tax base we have right now, like, this, we're barely, it's so hard to afford what plans we have to expand before you have, our tax base is getting bigger. You'll run into huge problems with building a 20-year facility.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the conversations we're preparing for and talking with as we establish our design basis is that, what is the queue? You know, and how does that balance out with the land use and when we think we're gonna hit those targets? And there's some flexibility just within the size of the treatment cells we're going to construct. Are those gonna be 16 by 16? And you're gonna run them at this rate, and then, you know, once you hit that goal, you double and you have 4 cells that are 16 by 16, or you build them 20 by 20 right now. And hopefully that gets you even further into the future when, I don't know, you might be considering another treatment plant in the northwest area at that point.
Right.
And that's exactly the conversation we want to have and balance that with, you know. So right now, we're one MGD plant. We might come back and say, yeah, I kind of like to build in the flexibility, so it's on paper really a 1.5, and that's going to get you this many years.
Right.
And building that economy right now.
Can we go back to Victoria for a little bit? This one ranked high, and I've been here for a lot of discussions with your national builders on materials and things. Is it, you liked the different materials and colors and finishes? So we could take something back to our architect? or what ranked this one so high? This is the highest ranking one,
The next one is the highest.
or the next
Not,
one was the
not
highest?
the next one.
Was there something you liked?
Last
about
one.
it, or you-
Oh, sorry, the last one.
We're gonna build a box that works.
Even-
What can we feed back to the architect?
Yeah, I mean, I think I like the features of it, the stone and the brick and just the looks like some metal panels. I mean, I think it's an appealing looking building in general with those materials and that kind of design of, you know, breaking up the materials as opposed to all, you know, look at the next one where it's just kind of a little brick line around it.
It seemed more timeless
Yeah.
than a lot of them. The things that I objected to when I was looking at them were things that I knew either already looked dated or would look dated in 30 years. So a design concept that is timeless would be advantageous, I think.
Yeah, like the Apple Valley one, it looks like a high school, right?
Mhm.
It's right across the street from a high school, so it works perfectly for that, you know,
Yeah.
specific location. The Maple Plain one is a little bit more on the scale of kind of what your facility would be, and this one does have an aeration tower. And so we're talking about some height considerations, you know, again, we don't want to, there's different ways to hide that, because that is quite tall, and you can drive by it and notice it. Yeah, how do you have those features so that it's more timeless and less, what's that?
Mhm.
It doesn't stick out as much. This one is in a subdivision, so it's made it look like a house. There's actually 2 garage doors, so it looks like it's sort of,
Yeah, but it looks like a commercial building that you have seen back from the turn of the century that's been kept up, you know? I think that's what's cool about a lot of architecture, a lot of the small towns, especially when you go out east in rural areas. They really did a good job of keeping up some of them, those old buildings. Like you say, they create a lot of character and they look timeless.
Mhm.
so yeah, the durable materials, the things that will
Blends in.
solid and timeless.
Mhm.
And then
And this was somebody had sent this one to us, wasn't it?
Jeremy did.
Guilty,
Looks like your garage.
a little bit.
Just kidding.
To me, it looks too much like a home in one of our
It,
developments.
yeah, but
What I liked about that one was it was more of a farm look. I liked the cupola, I liked the detail with the doors. I'm not as big on the stone part of it. I think it might be a little bit too much, but I liked that it was kind of like a barn.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
some of the more standard barn architecture design would be something I'd be interested in. Not necessarily this specifically, but because of the stone, but
What about like this building too, like, you know, is there any theme around the city buildings want to look? like city
I don't think we'd
building?
build a city building to look like this in the future. If you gave us a pot of money to redo this building.
It wouldn't look this way.
No, I don't think so.
Well, that's good feedback.
So don't copy existing city hall.
And it's far enough away that it doesn't have to blend
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, there's
Yep.
just, you know, that's
Mhm.
theme of some cities, they don't want to kind of look. City Hall has kind of, you know. We can jump into this. This is just the test well. I did want to just kind of circle back on this too. Like, if we were talking more about Bellwether's storage location, just talking too about, you know, the overall park area, and this purple area is the production well site that's identified. So a well will be, you know, is planned for that park area. And the purple setback is the 50-foot radius that's required as a setback for the production well. At the last meeting, council authorized, oh wait, is that tonight?
The
Test well 2 is on there
Yeah,
tonight.
It's on the
Yeah.
agenda tonight to approve.
Last time we went for RFPs, and so we got bids back, and Renner and Trout both bid on the test well, and that red dot is our proposed test well location. And so they'll drill the test well to get, look at water quality, make sure, groundwater, there's no issues, or unexpected things, and then it would be retained in the future as a monitoring well, so. That's just the only kind of purpose of this slide, was to say, as a reminder to everybody that, this production well will be in that whole other site, but, it's not the impact of a tower.
Right.
So our water treatment facility site only holds a test well right now?
Correct.
There was
Yeah.
no production well ever planned for that site?
Well, no, there will be production well on the water treatment plant site,
Yeah.
but bringing, we want to understand the water quality here, so that these are going to be the first 2 wells that service this treatment plant. We want to make sure that the water quality is consistent, and there's no surprises with this locations, because you're going to want to have that redundant well available to you.
As
Get started.
we continue to build out this northeast area, we're gonna be constantly looking at well sites and all of these developments that come in, just target on as we have to constantly bring that water back to the treatment plant. So this will become pretty common throughout them. And we're actually running infrastructure through this development to help support it. So that way the pipe's in the ground. So once that next development's there, we have the pipe there to help pump it back to the treatment plant.
So how many production wells potentially feed the water treatment facility?
Good question. As we grow our system, one of the things, we don't have them there, so it's really tough for us to answer it. So as we build these out, we really have a better understanding of what these wells, they may range from 500 GPM to, Maple Grove has some really high producing wells that are in excess of 1,000 gallons per minute. So we just have such a spectrum. So we'll have anywhere from 6 to more than that, and it really, that's why we're doing some of this initial testing to really understand. We're excited to get these wells in the ground to have some firm data to go from. We have water quality in those initial tests, but until we get the actual wells there for real data, we're really kind of forecasting.
So it's based on flow mainly?
Yes.
Okay, and then how many towers can we feed off of a treatment facility?
So feeding a tower is all based on, like how many wells you have online, so how much water you can produce,
Yeah.
and then also too, it's just based on pressure. So you're gonna have high service pumps at the treatment plant that push water into your system and fill your towers. So you set those elevations, and you can have towers anywhere. But you can just think of it as a wide spot in like the water main.
The tower is not based off your facility, it's based off the number of users. And so it's really not, the facility itself doesn't support, it's the number of.
Yeah, I just wanted, do you foresee in the future multiple facilities, or is that just based on we expand out the facility and then at some point we need a facility in a different location because Southwest develops or whatever, you know what I mean?
This facility is designed for like the northeast box.
Okay.
So if you take all the, correct me if I'm wrong, but generally
Please.
speaking, is the northeast box, and was based on the upland areas in the current plan. So if the pipe were to go down 116 in 5 to 10 years or 20 years, whatever, as you unlock other areas, decisions will be made either to expand this plant or start it somewhere else.
Okay.
So we're really looking at servicing northeast Corcoran with the system. So it's designed to guess and service the box. Once it goes beyond the box, we have to look at other alternatives. So water supply planning is now the norm in Corcoran. And so we'll be looking at water supply plan in southeast, and we talked about a little bit a couple meetings ago. What do we want to do there? We have water from Maple Grove, but at some point, do we want some sort of blended system? Do we want to negotiate more long-term with Maple Grove? Do we want to work towards getting off Maple Grove? Those are all decisions that we'll be routinely having with
Yeah.
water supply planning. And even for that matter, in southeast Corcoran, with some of the stuff coming, we're gonna have to start looking at what we're gonna do for water supply planning, because as these big pieces of land come in and get gobbled up, we're missing. We have to have that plan in place so that we can know where we wanna go. We can build that into our plans, and then we can get that when developments come in. And even if we don't do anything with it, we got a plan there, we preserved our options. To go back and retrofit these is really expensive, and so we want to get out ahead of that, so. Water supply planning will be the norm.
Yeah, as we come to the end of the year, it'll be a good 2022. We'll work on the southeast, we'll have been through this. We can talk about mixing and matching, or just get a better handle on both. So it's a good 2022 exercise.
Sounds good. Perfect. Anything else?
No.
You have anything else?
Looking ahead, we have a meeting planned next week. Just talking more about capacity, drilling down on some of those design basis and questions, and then our next meeting is scheduled with you folks in January. So we'll prime you on different decisions and updates that will want council input.
Sounds good. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, can I want to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. I think you will.